G'day guys, welcome to the next instalment of the WSSC Podcast. I'm Christian Woodford, as you guys know, and today's topic, I haven't done a podcast for a while. I've been very busy. Lots of stuff going on at the gym, a lot of stuff which will come out in the next few weeks over Facebook. We're doing a charity day. We're getting some really good athletes, getting some really good results. And there's a few other things that will go on, but it'll all be up on the Facebook page in the next few weeks. We are growing, we are getting bigger every week, so just look out for all that stuff. So today's topic, it was done by, the question was asked by Tim Rogers. So congratulations, Tim, on that, on getting asking the question, me answering it. It's going to be on off pre-season training, off pre-season strength training versus in-season strength programming. What are the differences? What are the main things we need to consider for our athletes? So if you're an athlete, how do you want to train them? What's the main difference between training them off-season, pre-season, during in-season? And this is what I'm going to go through today. It's a massive misconception on how to program for an athlete, especially in-season. A lot of people don't have any clue what they're doing. Most of the time, they will overtrain them. We are over-volumized as a country. If 2 sets are good, 3 sets are better. If 3 sets are good, 4 sets are better. If 4 sets are good, well, 5 must be the best. And that's the whole issue. It comes down to lack of understanding of physiology and neuroscience. And that's all it is. If you keep it simple with an athlete, you can really yield good adaptation to training. That's what we want. We want to keep them fit, we want to keep them healthy, and we want to keep them on the field. That's our job as performance coaches. Improve their ability to perform the skill by giving them the physical capacities to perform the skill. That's all it is. So we kind of break this down a little bit, and once again, I ad hoc everything. I don't really plan everything. That's kind of why I go on tangents with this stuff. I don't really plan anything. It's all off ad hoc. So I'm going to try and break it down and give you as much information for you guys out there, be it the athlete, be the aspiring strength coach, be it for all the strength coaches out there who watch this podcast. Before I start, I want you to understand that this is just my methods on how to do it. When I came back from the States, I was actually quite surprised at how many people were having a go at my methods. I mean, at the end of the day, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And your methods really just come down to understanding your basic fundamental sports science principles and how you apply them. Now, you can have 10 different coaches all programming differently, but all end up to the same goal. The best coaches in the world, their core principles will stay the same. Compound, multi-joint, multi-planar, ground-based movements, training kinetic chain, focusing on post-chain development. That was one thing that stuck out. Like, successful people leave clues. So whenever I worked under a coach, I always try to get the main points, what they were trying to get across. What are their methodologies? What are their main ways to develop athletes? And pretty much what I got was, just got to keep it simple. Keep it very simple. Most guys who come to the gym aren't strong enough. Got to get their strength level up. As you hear me bang on all the time about my podcast on Facebook, strength is a foundation of speed and power. Greater strength, greater power, speed, potential. So if you're a novice and you raise your strength up, your power and speed will concurrently increase as well. And as you know, strength, vital, vital, vital. Just get your strength up. So just remember, this is just my methods, and it's one way of doing things. You might like some of it, you might not like some of it. And I say to all the guys who ever come in, or anyone who ever learns off me, I say, look, these are just my Woodford SSC methods, my training systems, okay? You might like some of it, you might not like some of it. You might take away some of it, you might not take away some of it. That's fine. This is just my way of doing things. That's the first thing I want to say. So please, no negative feedback. You know, I understand. I'm always happy to listen to your points, what you think. That's fine. You know, I'm not in this game, but, you know, I'm not really one to, if you're going to shoot me down, that's up to you guys, but I mean, just listen to the points that I come across. So, first thing you want to think about it this way: off-season training, pre-season training. The athlete might have a window, and depending on the sport, might have a window of about 6 months in off pre-season. Okay, this is the time as a strength coach where you can yield really good gains. You can really get a lot of work in them. Okay, think about it this way: you don't have any you don't have any games. You don't have to recover. There's no fatigue. If you can't really build them up in this time period in terms of off pre-season, you're not a very good coach. Okay, you have to really, you have to really build them up and really get some work into them. So, I mean, this all comes down, remember individualization, all comes down to the athlete. Okay? And if you've got an untrained individual, say, let's use it for example. We've got an 18-year-old kid and he comes into the AFL. Never lifted before, which is common for AFL. Never lifted, never done your basic fundamental motor patterns, your squats, your deadlifts, your bench press, your row, your overhead press, your chins. Never done them, right? You get an 18-year-old kid in, your first thing you want to do is, first thing that I want to do is, one, put a bit of strength on, and one, put size on to deal with the contact. They've got to build body armour. So what you do in that scenario is you just get them on a basic program which just emphasizes hypertrophy and strength. I mean, with a novice athlete, as I've told you guys before, is any training stimulus will yield really good gain in strength, in power, in speed, but also muscle hypertrophy. Now, obviously, there's a nutritional component to hypertrophy. Let's leave that nutrition out of the moment. Obviously, nutrition is really critical. You got to eat your carbohydrate and your protein, because if you don't eat, you can't grow. And that's one issue that I've seen with a lot of athletes. They don't eat enough, create a calorie surplus to really grow. But that's all for another issue. So going back to our off-season, pre-season example, it all depends on the individual. So, example, if he's a novice, if they're a novice, if they're intermediate, or if they're advanced, will all dictate the programming that we do, and especially myself. It all depends on the athlete. Now, you've got to go back to the coach as well, and you've got to really integrate with your coaches and say, okay, well, this guy's going to play in this position. What does he need? And he might turn around and say, this is what I think he needs, and obviously working with our performance testing, what was his speed, what was his strength, what was his agility, what do you think he lacks? And that will dictate the physiological goal of the program. So really you've got to work on really getting load through their body. And when I mean load, I mean talking about it's called periodization. And if you guys don't know what periodization is breaking training into blocks, with each block emphasizing a different strength physiological quality. So we could be emphasizing hypertrophy, functional strength, which is called anatomical adaptation, max strength, power, or strength endurance. So depending on your loading parameters, your volumes, your intensities, your rest periods, your frequency, your exercise selection, this will all dictate what your goal is. So if you do have an athlete and it's at the start of the season, most of the times you're going to try and get a fair bit of work in them, so you're going to try and build them up as much as possible. Strength won't be the main focus early on. When we talk in terms of periodization, we break it down into blocks. We break it general prep, specific prep, competitive, and transitional. The general prep phase is mainly the phase where you get your athletes, where it will focus on general rather than sports-specific conditioning, and we really try and get a fair bit of work in them. So if you look in the weight room, in terms of how we program them, it probably, if it's a novice athlete or someone, but look, anyone who's coming back from a layoff of 6 weeks, you'd probably start them on a functional strength phase. Now, functional strength phase is just preparing their tissues, their ligaments, their tendons for the stress involved in the sport, and obviously preparing their neuromuscular system for sport. So it's just laying the foundations of conditioning and preparing the player for the stresses involved in the skill in the sport. Depending on how long they've trained in the weight room would dictate how long that functional strength phase would go. If you're a highly trained individual, you might do 3 to 4 weeks. If you're an untrained individual, any stimulus will yield good adaptation, you'll do 6 to 8 weeks. Now you've got to remember, it all comes back down once again to the athlete. Everything's back to the athlete. So I can't really give you a specific number on this. I can't really give you that. Once again, it all just comes down to the athlete and what the athlete's needs. The higher trained individual, after 2 to 4 weeks of doing that functional strength phase, and you've got to remember they've had this layoff. You look at AFL as a sport, which is it's a high endurance based sport, obviously with periods of high intensity repeat effort. Most of those guys aren't strong enough. Also, they go away for 8 weeks, and this is the VFL amateurs as well. A lot of those guys, if they're not consistent, they don't really go. They really don't go to the weights room. They don't go to the gym enough, and they're actually detraining a fair bit. And what will happen is when they come back, they're obviously not as strong as they were when they went away. Now, some guys obviously train hard. Other guys, I'm guessing, wouldn't, and that's a big thing. So, if a guy who's more advanced than a novice comes in, you might go 4 weeks for a functional strength phase. Then after that, you just look at what we call accumulation hypertrophy phase. So a hypertrophy phase main goal is to build that body armor. Now, it's not maximal loads used, it's sub-maximal loads. We're looking around that rep range of probably 8 to 12. So it's moderate load. We're lifting for reps. We're looking mainly characteristics of hypertrophy training is high constant time on attention, minimal rest periods, high lactate, high hydrogen build-up. We're looking for that metabolic effect. Remember, hypertrophy comes down to 2 factors: mechanical tension and metabolic stress. we're looking for the minimal rest periods to increase testosterone and growth hormone release, which we've seen in literature. When the rest periods are lower, we increase testosterone and growth hormone. They're both really needed for increasing muscle size, muscle hypertrophy. And a really big thing which we're focusing on is functional hypertrophy, or myofibrillar hypertrophy, which is increasing the size of the muscle while increasing the force generating capacity. When you look at bodybuilders, their main goal is really not, it's more aesthetic, so really they don't care if they get that force generating unit, that force generating capacity. They're mainly looking for what we call non-functional hypertrophy, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. So they really don't care about that functional tissue, where athletes, where for us, we've got to really concentrate on that functional tissue. So they've gone through the pre-season period, and say if they're past the novice phase and they're in the hypertrophy block, what you want to be doing is getting them to peak for the season. So probably, say 6 to 8 weeks out, you run them what we call a max strength power block. Now, I'm a true believer in adding strength and power together. There's some guys who just only have a power only block. How do you integrate? What's the best way of doing it? As you guys know, I use my eight sets of programming, and I pick one each time. We always have an explosive exercise, and this is for lower body. Always an explosive exercise. Always have a bilateral exercise. Always have a unilateral exercise, and always have a core exercise. So it's about being time effective and really getting through that session as quick as possible, but maintaining really good quality. So you put them into what we call a max strength block. And max strength is really lifting. It's characterized by heavy load, low velocity. No matter what the intention is to move the weight quickly, but the heavier the external load, the slower the bar speed obviously going to be, because you're going to move heavier weight. That means we're going to look back to the force velocity curve. The higher the force, the lower the velocity. The higher the velocity, the lower the force. So if you've got a high external load, force is going to be maximized, so strength will be developed, and velocity, power, speed will be lessened. So we put them through a max strength block along with a power block. You got to remember, pre-season training, they don't have a game, they don't have injuries, they don't have a lot of fatigue, because we can monitor them as much as possible. So you do that block. Main thing is about really stimulating your CNS, increasing motor unit recruitment, and increasing rate of force development. And that's the whole thing which we aim for: massive neural load and high muscular load, especially if you max force lift. You'd start looking at doing some form of Olympic lifting, even if it's just a progression, hang clean pull, hang clean high pull, something like that, where we're getting high bar velocity, high quick movement speed, and your intention is to move the weight quickly. We're going to get really that power adaptation and increasing rate of force development, which is really important, because you've got to remember there's a lot of guys out there who only do slow velocity lifts. Now we've got my assistant JP, very good power lifter in Australia, one of the best in the world in his weight category. If you look at JP, we're doing 10 metre sprints, and he ran I think 10 metres with 1.7, 1.8. That's very slow, because he's trained his body slow. If you train slow, you're going to get slow. Okay, so in terms of his neural patterning, his M1 firing those electrical impulses from your EC coupling, it's just slowing very slowly, because he's trained very slow velocity. So what he's done is he does all heavy load training. So he really looks at your singles, your doubles, your triples, and he works on that, because his main goal is to lift as much weight as humanly possible, and he doesn't really care about the movement speed. It's just slow velocity training. And that's pretty much one of the only sports you produce force over prolonged periods of time. Most sports, all sports in general, you got to produce force rapidly. You got to get the muscle to contract forcefully and rapidly, and that's what's going to win you games. So after you've done that, obviously that pre-season block, and you've really built them up, you've got that body armor, you've got that strength base, you've got that power base, you should have them really peaking in season for round one. Now, you've got to remember, you look at all the AFL boys, when they get to pre-season, in-season, round 1, round 2, round 3, they're huge. They're jacked up. Most of these guys spend a summer in the gym working really hard, doing their body armor up. It's really important. Really important, because in season they might, some of them, most of them, do lose a fair bit of size. And what happens when you lose a bit of size is you decrease your explosive force generating capacity of your neuromuscular system. Obviously, especially if you're doing high endurance work, and you obviously decrease the frequency of sessions, because in off season you can build them up, so you can have the frequency set at, I would do 4 to 3 sessions. In season it's a lot harder to do that. I've heard teams doing as much as 4 sessions a week, 2 lowers, 2 uppers. I'd keep it simple and stick to two sessions, maybe 3 if you can fit it in. But no matter what, they will lose, and you try and prevent it, because you want to prevent decay of strength as much as possible. But in season, you drop the frequency and increase in aerobic load. What will happen is we're going to get some sort of detraining and decreases in strength, power, speed, and agility, decrease in your neural capacity, the anaerobic capacity, which is it's not good, especially for elite athletes. You've got to maintain their strength as much as possible. So what they do see is they see a bit of atrophy through the muscle. They see decreases in strength. The main thing in season is maintenance. You want to maintain that strength, power, speed, agility, and work capacity that you've built up all pre-season, okay? A lot of people ask me, should you lift in season? Yes, it's imperative to lift in season. Imperative, vital. Okay, what we see at our performance center is the guys who, they do all the hard work with us over the pre-season. They build themselves up, and they get to season and they stop. They stop lifting. For me, it's just a waste. You've just done all that hard work and you've dropped, and what we found was, once they get to season, their strength drops off because they stop lifting altogether. Their strength drops off, their power drops off, their speed and their agility drops off. That's because you aren't doing any work. That neural drive is lessened. You don't have that strength, power, speed, agility, increase in chance of injury, decrease in performance. And we've seen it all the time. But the guys who lift throughout and they maintain that strength, as I said, strength. If you're not training for strength, you're not training for force, you're losing it. Okay, and what happens is these guys completely lose their force generating capacity and they get injured. They start getting soft tissue injuries. Remember, strength training is a prevention of injury. Okay, it's going to increase connective tissue strength, increasing muscle contractile strength as well, which is really important. So in season, how I would do it, once again, goes back to the individual. If they're lower trained, you can still keep them putting through a hypertrophy block. I mean, you don't have to do anything special, nothing over the top. You've got to keep it really simple as possible, focusing on your basic compound movements. It's really being time effective. What you don't want to do is metabolically load them in season. That's a terrible thing to do. I mean, what you want to concentrate on, it goes pre-season, goes high volume, low intensity, general to specific conditioning. And then it goes, obviously, in season, high intensity, low volume, specific conditioning, specific work. So when I say specific, we're looking for metabolic specificity in terms of your conditioning. In terms of your strength, we're looking for that high power, high speed, so high neural loading. If you are doing high accumulation blocks in season, I don't think it's a very good idea because lactate has been correlated with overtraining as well. And what will happen is these guys will consistently break down. And what you want to do is your main job in season is maintain it and just keep these boys as fresh as possible. You've got to remember the main goal is physical performance, is performance of the sport. Okay, it's not to keep them in the gym. You don't want to beat them down so they can't train. Training's the number one thing they need to focus on. We are second to the skill. We're secondary. Okay, we complement the skill. Always remember that. Leave your ego at the door. Just remember, that's our job. Okay, you've got to keep them fresh, you've got to keep them injury-free, and that's what the best strength coaches do. Keep it simplistic as possible. Okay, for me, what I'll do in season, I would do explosive movement. That could be anything. That could be a plyo, that could be Olympic lifting, that could be med ball work. I'll do a heavy strength loading as long as it's periodized properly. I'd push from the floor, so I'd squat, I'd deadlift. I'll chuck some upper body work in, keep it very simple. I'll do a single leg movement, and then I would do a quad and hip dominant, and I'll do a core movement. That would be it. Okay, keep it simple, keep it high quality, high intensity, low volume as much as possible, periodize in an overload fashion, and try and maintain that strength. Now, it is possible for a novice or a lower training individual to increase their strength in season. Very much possible. And what you will find is in season is you won't be as tired, you recover a lot quicker between games, and you won't get injured at all. Minimally would you get injured. Most of the guys who train with us through the entire season did not get injured. And that's a credit to us and my coaching staff that we put in the work with them. And that's one thing is injury prevention is a big key. Sports performance and injury prevention, and that's what your job should be. So yeah, pretty much that's the main thing in terms of in-season, off-season, pre-season versus in-season programming. The main takeaway point is you want to keep it as simple. Off-season you really want to build them up. You want to get as much volume in them as possible. You want to build the body armor. You want to increase their strength. To a point, you want to increase their power in the off pre-season, but that's going to come later when we get more specific. Focus on general, then it gets more specific in terms of your conditioning, your strength, power, speed model, and that's what you want to work on. And then obviously in season, the main thing is about maintenance. Maintain what you have. If you can increase, if they're lower trained, you will increase. If they're higher trained, they might detrain a little bit. That's fine. You just got to keep working, keeping them fresh. Don't fatigue them. Keep it simple. maintain their strength, get their strength up, power speed will be maintained as well. Strength is the foundation of everything. That's one point that I keep drilling across, but it's so vital. We forget about the quality of strength in Australia. For some reason, everyone thinks it's an endurance-based sport, especially football, so we don't think we need to maintain our strength. Strength is just simplistic and basic. Get your strength up, everything else will follow. Hope this podcast helped you guys out. Any questions, please email me at christian@woodfordssc.com. Look for the updates on the Facebook page. Other than that, guys, live strong and I'll see you soon. Thanks very much.